So I just watched a video by Adrian over on his channel metaRising that's introducing a series of further videos he wants to make about consciousness, um, the question of consciousness, the problem of consciousness, the paradox of what gets called the hard problem of consciousness, first by the philosopher of mind, David Chalmers. Um, by asking this question or by framing the problem, you could say, in a certain way in regards to the scientific study of consciousness in the way that he did. Chalmers kind of invented a new industry, or a publishing industry, but an academic discipline also at the same time, that is, well, really diving into, as Adrian put it, the heart of scientific ontology. It's being forced to do so, to approach um, consciousness not just as another puzzle for normal science to unravel um, and explain, but rather as a deep paradox that um, forces one to begin reflecting upon the scientific process itself. Um, the study of consciousness is the scientist's study of himself or herself. It's the knower attempting to know itself. And science hasn't really asked these questions in the modern period. It's left that sort of metaphysical stuff behind. Philosophers have Modern philosophers have largely left it behind too, to the extent that they spend most of their time peering over the shoulders of scientists, as Professor Corey Anton recently put it. There aren't really many philosophers who are asking those fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness. There are some, and their work is increasingly important and being taken more and more seriously. Um, because really, the problem of consciousness goes deep enough into the very heart of scientific ontology, and um, it challenges our normal ways of thinking about what we often call materialism, but also what we call, theism. So there are certain materialistic atheisms and certain theistic creationisms that both miss the point about consciousness, I think, um, which is that we can't look to something external to or independent of consciousness in order to explain consciousness. Consciousness is part and parcel of what there is. It's an actual feature of the universe that we experience, that we know and have access to. To try to explain a universe that doesn't have consciousness, to try to explain what the brain does as though it were fundamentally non-conscious, that it's just pure extended bodies in motion without any sort of interiority or felt presence of what its likeness to be. Um, if we were to, there's no point in trying to understand the brain that way, if in fact the brain just so happens to be conscious. As Adrian was saying, from a materialist perspective, when we look at a brain, there's no reason to suppose that the lump of meat we see there, with 3 pound organ, full of, um, you know, ganglia and, you know, action potentials, we would have no reason to suspect that it would be conscious, that it would be a person, right? And yet it does. So what does that mean? If there's apparently a complete disconnect between how we study the physical world and what we understand our own first person immediate experience of being a person, if those two things seem um, incoherent when we attempt to think them as an integral whole, as an integral reality, then clearly our conception of one or the other must be mistaken, right? We must not be using the most effective conceptual um, paradigms, tools that we could be. And so we need ultimately to do some metaphysical work to begin inquiring into ontological questions, questions of being, questions of appearance versus reality, and the way that appearance may in fact partake in reality, and vice versa, the way in which the facts of nature, as science has supposed it has been studying, and the values that, I guess religions suppose, and governments, states suppose that they have been protecting and upholding, these are not finally separate um, ontological registers. Facts and values are both um, implicated in one another's uh, constitutions. Like, so there is no such thing as a fact without a set of values um, to bring it forth from a background of insignificance. A fact is already itself significant, um, and no value exists independently of some, uh, you know, actual encounter with the world. You Values are events in the world. They emerge in the context of everyday life. Um, and so, values require facts. Facts require values. And once you start to feel your way into that sort of a situation, um, it no longer makes sense, for example, to be, a supernaturalist or an intelligent design theist or deist, nor does it make sense to be a reductionistic materialist and a nihilist, an atheist. Rather, both perspectives are extremes on what should remain um, a sort of uh, a polarity of understanding, where what there is not just, a distant God who created the world we see around us according to his transcendent laws. Um, Nor is what we see around us just a random assemblage of purposelessly colliding particles, but rather there is a sort of dynamic interplay, a cooperative adventure um, unfolding where some sort of an intelligent will or an aesthetic desire for beauty has been playing itself out in the course of mm, the evolution of some sort of a particulate, um, matter, we say. For someone like Alfred North Whitehead, who I've talked a lot about on my channel, matter is made up of drops of experience. Atoms are um, little occasions of um, experience. They're, you know, little eyes blinking, taking in the world, and then perishing, taking in the world and perishing. And uh, what we perceive as a physical, pre-existent, objective, extended substance is really just an accumulation of these drops of experience over the course of many aeons of time, such that a sort of echo is preserved and a memory is etched into, well, into what, right? That's the question. Um, into the mind of God, ultimately. What we see around us is, in some sense, a magic show, um, created by well, it's nameless. It's Tao. It's what Whitehead called creativity, which you can't point to. You can barely talk about it because it's such a general idea as to be um, unapproachable. You can't really wrap a concept around it such that the word I use, creativity, designates some clear and distinct mental entity in your mind. We have plenty of examples of creativity. In fact, the point is we only have examples of creativity. Um, and creativity isn't God. It's not a person. Um, it's not a free will or intelligent designer. Creativity isn't just sheer randomness either. There's some longing, some yearning for realization, for incarnation. Creativity, the most indefinite, universal, general, whatever that there is, wants to become particular, unique, specific, individual. And I suppose you could flip this around and say that the individual wants to be creative as well. The